Good afternoon all. Can someone confirm is my screen is visible to you all?
Yes, sir.
Visible, sir.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the confirmation. We will begin our today's discussion. In our previous class, we just completed the chapter 1, that is introduction, where we dealt in detail about what is mean by fatigue, what is the fatigue mechanism, and few design philosophies. As a designer, you want to pick which type of philosophy, whether you want to go for infinite life design philosophy, where component is assumed not to fail for infinite number of cycles. You design the component to sustain long service life, very long service life. Ideally, infinite life, the component should not fail. Or whether you want to take up safe life approach, that means up to the life specified by the designer, the component should not fail. After that, it may fail, it may not fail. That is not a designer's concern. But up to the defined life, the component should not fail. And after the defined life, you have to retire that from the service. And then comes fail safe or safe fail type of design concept. And in that, we plan even if the component fail during the service, we plan such that in our design the component fails safely without causing any risk and giving sufficient warning for necessary corrective action before it fails. Either you plan with some supporting system so that the may component may sustain the given life period. Then we can plan for the last approach, that is damage tolerant design. Here we have to understand one basic assumption that every material has a flaw. And when every material has a flaw, the next job is to measure the size of that flaw and then continuously monitor whether it is going to grow or not. If that crack or flaw is growing, then at what rate it is growing. So periodic maintenance or periodic inspection is inevitable in this type of design concept. So these are all few design ideas we have looked into. We have also looked into few models, mathematical models belonging to total life calculation category, belonging to propagation life category, and some brief history about fatigue and related certain parameter which affects the fatigue life. This is all we discussed in the first chapter. And then we started with this chapter number 2, high cycle fatigue life. And in that, as a beginning introduction, we have not yet started actually high cycle fatigue life concept. We'll start today. As a beginning, initially you must know what and all type of fatigue loads a component can experience. What is the nature of fatigue loads possible? Usually we say, in definition we say, fatigue is a damage caused by cyclic load, the progressive localized damage caused during the cyclic load. So what and all type of cyclic load you can apply? That is a question, because here this diagram etc. I have discussed in last class. For example, you design a component by considering completely reversed load. By considering completely reversed. This is completely reversed. Sigma max, whatever you have, is equal to sigma minimum, but value is negative. That is it. So tension compression. Typical tension compression, completely reversed alternating loading. If you design for this, any component you design for this, but in service, you go and apply any other type of load pattern shown here, then your component may fail much early than what you have designed for. So as a designer, why to learn about various loading pattern is the material response for different type of load pattern is different. It is not same. Suppose you are expecting your component to take up this type of tension type of alternating loading, tension. Some sigma max positive and some sigma minimum that is also positive. Okay. In this case, there are two load components which are going to arise in the material. One is known as sigma A, alternating stress component, and other one is known as sigma M, which we say that mean stress. So whenever we have any other type of loading than case 1, what is given here, then the component is under some constant static load along with the applied alternating load. So this causes or reduces the life of the component when you consider with respect to the completely reversed loading. Okay, this is very important, and that is the reason we should also carefully see what is the load experienced by the component. Okay, so we'll go further. This diagram also we have seen in our previous class. Various parameters have been shown, various type of load. So tension compression type of load, if it is fully reversed, it is one case. Then other type of tension compression we can have where higher magnitude sigma max, lower sigma minimum, then it is not fully reversed. It is a case of mean stress load. Okay. Or we can have tension type, we can have compression type, compression type loading, or we can have tension compression but not completely reversed, maybe in this particular fashion. Okay, so these are all the possibilities we can have. Then repeated loading, 0 to some maximum, come back to 0. So this pattern, or in the reverse side, opposite direction, similar pattern. These are all cases which are possible. But what happens in reality? In reality, component is no longer expecting the same type of load. Component will expect highly random pattern, what is shown in the last figure here, figure C. Highly random load. This is the most often reality. We cannot predict every time what is the load a component will experience. In the later slide, I will show you some of the practical example load patterns. You can understand how difficult it could be for the designer to analyze. So from designer point of view, what we do is from this practical scenario, highly random loading, practical, most practical, this type of load pattern is known as random cyclic loads. Okay. So from this, we simplify to, as we have looked into figure B. From case C, we simplify the load pattern. What we can observe in the figure B here. Maybe for this I'll write with different color. Okay. We simplify as that of figure B. This is B. Okay, figure B. Like this, we'll simplify. So how to simplify and get it? There are many methods. Most commonly known, one of the method is JRain or rain flow counting method. JRain, there is a software called JRain. If you feed the practical data into this software, it will give you the simplified load pattern. Okay, rain counting method. There are many peak counting method. Several methods are there, but those are not there in your present syllabus. For if your own interest you want to venture, please look into textbook J.A. Collins. Okay, J. Collins textbook, whose reference is there in the syllabus or the file which I uploaded. You can look into this particular book. The detail is there. Book you have to see online if it is available, because very costly books these are. In our library it is available. Okay, so in this book you will find various methods which can be adopted to simplify the practical loading into variable amplitude loading. So this is known as variable amplitude loading. So amplitude is not constant, but it is in the block. It is in the block. One particular amplitude we apply for one certain block. So this is also known as, or we will also say, block loading. This is another name what we are giving to this type of loading pattern. So here from this random pattern, you count. We need to count how many cycles in the total load history, how many cycles of this much S1 type of load amplitude cycles are available. All that you consider together, let us say all together there are 10 to the power 3 S1 type of loading available from the random loading case. Then some S2 type of loading magnitude cycles are available for some 10 to the power 4 cycles. Then S3 magnitude of or amplitude of load cycles are available, maybe 100 numbers. And then next load pattern of some magnitude. It could be tension also. Here we can observe several tension cycles are there, not even completely reversed. So this total random history, the complex random history, need to be broken down into variable amplitude loading or block loading for the analysis purpose. So most often engineers look into this type or more simplified version as discussed above when we are going to design. Designing for the practical random history is very difficult. Maybe with the use of sophisticated systems, the softwares nowadays available. If you want to know, I will write two software names. If you get access anywhere, you can look into. In case of ANSYS, there is ENCODE Design Life. There is a software module ENCODE Design Life. This is a module available in ANSYS. We do not have here presently. Okay, ANSYS ENCODE Design Life, separately license is available for this. Or there is a software called FE-Safe. FE-Safe, highly used in the industry. FE-Safe, these both, especially FE-Safe is people are using it more and more to do the fatigue related simulations. Okay, conventional tools with ANSYS, Workbench, what you know, from there you can do the fatigue analysis, but not to the extent or not to the freedom what you will get by using these corresponding specialized specific fatigue analysis modules in the software. This is only for your reference. You can look into anywhere if you get and you are interested to do fatigue analysis, you can look into these two softwares. Okay. So these are few examples. Here I stopped in my previous class. This figure I have shown it to you. Various components, several engineering components. So you can see day-to-day life we use one or the other type of component. Most of the engineering applications, whether it is industries or consumer related applications, we use all these components. And in all these cases, there is no steady load. You cannot say it is experiencing steady load, highly random load. Then we will break down it into some further simplified version. So you can see here reference I have quoted. For more details, you refer to this author's paper. More detail on this is given there. T. Seeger, this author's book. If you put his name in Google Scholar, you can find the related paper. Okay. Then let us look into some load pattern for practical application which are acquired by sensors and all. Here you can observe. Okay. If you take axle, the rear axle of a passenger car, once you start from there till you travel certain distance, definitely this is terrain based. Okay, not a generalized, terrain based, load based, how much acceleration you give, all that factors matter. I think now you can consider how much difficult it is to get the actual load pattern. It depends on the driver, how much acceleration he is giving, when he is accelerating, when he is leaving the acceleration pedal, when he is changing the gear. Depending on that, it is. If we cannot have generalized conditions straightforward. Multiple such cases, all such various drivers need to be driving the vehicle. You need to have all those sensors mounted, take all these type of load data. Or in laboratory, you can rotate the axle at some desired acceleration and acceleration. Only axle, entire automobile is not required. It is a power transmission case. You make only that setup and obtain the data. So if it is a passenger car, then this is the most common observed pattern in laboratory condition. I would like to say in laboratory condition. Okay, when tested with certain sensors during testing condition, this type of load pattern is observed. Similarly, various components you can observe. Pressure in the condensation chamber of a reactor. Okay, you can observe relatively randomness is reduced compared to the passenger car axle. In this case, condensation chamber. Stresses on a car wheel. What type of load pattern a car wheel takes. Drive shaft or any several components have been shown here. Okay, so this is the real scenario. The practical loading pattern is this. Definitely I'll say not fully practical, because full real-time practical data acquisition itself is not possible. All data acquisitions are done with the certain assumptions. So this is 2016 paper, International Journal of Fatigue. In this, it is published, authored by CM Sonsino. Okay, so you can look into this reference for more details, the discussion on each of these load pattern. Okay. This paper you refer, those who are interested, academic point of view, exam point of view, not an issue. Whatever handouts are more than sufficient, but for your knowledge, because this is a specialized engineering course. Okay, so for your knowledge purpose, you can look into this particular reference. You will understand the concepts, how people are trying to analyze this type of load pattern, nicely explained in the paper. Okay, fine. So now you have the idea how to break it down into into regular analyzable load pattern from the random load history. Practical to block loading, and then consider each set and calculate the life. So total life should be corresponding to life because of load S1 plus life because of load S2 plus life because of load S3. Okay, how much life will get by each load? Together total is the net life a component can have. Okay, if you calculate only with NS1, it might tell you that total life is 10 to the power 6 cycles. But when you have multiple variable amplitude loads, different magnitude loads for certain number of block cycles, then the life could be much lesser than 10 to the power 6 also, maybe 10 to the power 4 also. Later we'll see how this load pattern is going to affect the fatigue life. Okay, at the end of this chapter, we are going to look into that load sequence, how it affects. Whether to have a overload cycle initially is better. So sometimes in fatigue, we give some overload cycle purposefully. Sometimes it is better, not always. That you have to see as a designer. We'll look into such interesting concept later. Okay, you just keep now in mind that is also possible. So that means in what way you apply this loading pattern, whether you apply S1 first on the component directly when you start the loading of the component, or in service you start the usage of the component, whether you are going to apply S1 first or S2 level loading first on the component. This affects a lot to the fatigue life. It is not that interchanging is possible. Okay, the life of the component when you are calculating, if you calculate in this fashion, life because of S1 first and then S2 and S3 is totally different than total life you are going to find by applying this S3 type of load first and then applying maybe S1 type of load and then applying S2 type of load. So what this means, the sequence in which load is applied over the component is also effective in or influencing the total life. Now you can understand it is not that easy to predict. Mathematically, there is no difference between these two equations. Mathematically, no difference. If you use the same mathematical equation without considering the accumulated damage, then it either way, NT total life is same mathematically. Practically, it is not that. Then you need to alter your mass equation for either case. Give that particular parameter damage accumulated because of S3, and over that you are applying the next cycle. When you start loading, some damage is going to accumulate. Over that you are applying the next cycle now. Okay, so these are all some of the concepts we must keep in mind whenever we are planning to design for fatigue with the variable amplitude loading, different amplitude of the loading. Okay, constant amplitude loading is there, whether it is completely reversed or with some mean stress. Only one type of load cycle you are applying, then it is not a big issue. Straightforward analysis it is. But multiple type of load patterns are there. Then in what sequence they have applied, that is also important to consider in the analysis. Okay, we may not go that much deep here in the discussion. Only one or two problem of such we'll address, but the more and more practical scenario is like that. Okay, fine. Let us look into now first step into the high cycle fatigue. Now this you might be very well aware from your MD1. You had one chapter design with the fatigue, design for fatigue life. You might have calculated the size of the shaft or whatever you have designed in your MD1. MD1 course you have used this diagram. Okay, but there you may not have learned how to construct this particular diagram or read all the parameters or the diagram. Okay, let us look into that. SN curves are also known as Euler diagram. A German material scientist engineer Euler in 1820s, 1829, 1820s time. We have seen with the history. Okay, 1820s. He is also known as father of high cycle fatigue life design. Okay, or those concepts. That time SN curves have been brought into a systematic way. Euler has presented SN curves for several industry materials during that time. Mostly of it is steel during that time. Okay, so here S indicate stress and N notation indicates number of cycles or life. Okay, number of cycles or life. S indicates stress. So when we say SN, it means stress life curves. That is the meaning of SN. Okay, so this curve actually defines the locus of cycles to failure for a given cyclic stress. We'll look into the curve later in the next slide. So one of the common tests which is done to obtain this is rotating beam. Rotating in this, when we have beam means it is nothing but bending test. We estimate the curve by a bending test, rotating bending test. We'll look into this in the coming slide, how to do this particular test. Okay, this is conventional, most conventional from the beginning. When Euler did the SN curve, he used this particular method, rotating beam bending test method. Okay, to some extent, not fully extended, but later R.R. Murray, he did much improvised and clear type of testing that we'll see in the next slide. Okay, let us look here first. So rotating beam or the bending test, rotating bending test is one of the standard and used often to consider the to draw the SN diagram. Why bending? Because that will give us the completely reverse tension compression. Recall your knowledge of strength of material. Please recall bending. You have a shaft, let us say. You have applied some load at the center. Okay, you expect that to bend in this particular fashion. For example, you have a neutral axis, correct? You have a neutral axis. How stresses are distributed about the neutral axis? If I sketch a cross-sectional plane, now stress distribution plot which you have drawn in your strength of materials. Extreme fiber, higher stresses, and as you come towards the neutral axis, very low stresses. This is your stress distribution diagram. One side you used to write sigma T, one side you used to write sigma C. Okay, whether it is circular or square bar, usually it is circular. When we say shaft, I should draw a circular. In general, there are square section shafts also. In general, is a circular. Okay, let us take circle. Okay, so this is what is your stress plot. Now you rotate. Okay, rotate this bar. Then what happens? Each fiber about the neutral axis will undergo alternating, completely reverse tension and compression. So here the element which is there below the neutral axis is under tension. When you rotate it, it will undergo the compression. That is the idea. Okay, so you have a small element here below the neutral axis. You have tension experienced over it. You have a small element above the neutral axis. You have compression experiencing over that. Now you rotate this shaft. The shaft will undergo, the same layer will undergo alternating tension and compression. Same magnitude. That is the meaning saying that completely reversed stress cycles. That is what is meant by alternating tension compression. Actually, completely reversed. So now you know the idea what is meant by completely reversed. I have explained with the loading cycle earlier slides. Okay, fine. Then for each revolution or with the total number of revolution you give, calculate the stresses and the corresponding number of revolutions at that particular stress value. How much is the total life it will give you at a defined stress value? Plot that over the graph. Usually, or when it was developed in the earlier stage, the ascent diagram is a log plot. It is a log plot, or people nowadays also use semi-log plot. Why to use semi-log plot? Because this life of the component usually in high cycle fatigue, greater than 10 to the power 3, greater than this particular value. Maybe for steel material in between we'll plot 10 to the power 3 to 10 to the power 6. For aluminium, copper, we may go up to 10 to the power 8. Okay, so you can see the power here, 10 to the power 6, 10 to the power 8. With the regular normal scale, you cannot plot that. Okay, so when you have x and y axis, x-axis we plot life. This has to be log of the life because it is a large number, 10 to the power 8, 10 to the power 6, where y-axis we can go for log, or we can retain as it is because this is a stress value. You can write 100 MPa, 150 MPa, 200 MPa like this scale, or you write this also in the logarithmic value. That doesn't matter because the variation in the y direction is very small. How much strength the material can have maximum? 1000 MPa, 1200 MPa. Okay, so plotting 0 to 1000 when compared to plotting 0 to 10 to the power 8 over the scale is quite difficult. You can understand the difference. Okay, then frequency means at what frequency that shaft has been rotated. What is the rotating frequency of the shaft for a standard testing? Okay, so metals are known to be insensitive for the frequency or speed of rotation during this bending test. However, full practical analysis have shown that there is some variation response of different material, steels, aluminum and all, but the sensitiveness is not fully dominant. It is a negligible. So when we say insensitive here, it has to be considered that whatever is sensitiveness is there, that is negligible. Okay, and we must also see that we are not rotating the shaft at resonating frequency. That is important, or else component will fail because of resonance, vibration. So one idea is there. When we say the frequencies here, you must keep in mind that when it is said insensitive, we are talking about the frequency which is not the resonating frequency for the given specimen. Okay, at that resonating frequency, obviously each and every materials are sensitive, including metals. Okay, fine. Then fatigue life for polymers, which are low strength material compared to metals, is known to be highly dependent on the frequency also. Okay, the bonding is different, the chemical composition, the strength of each material is totally different. Polymers, elastomers, the behavior is completely different, the non-linear behavior materials as compared to metals. Metals, we assume linearity up to yield point, linear behavior. That is also assumption. Practically 100% linear we will not get, but some extent we can have the linearity. So whatever non-linearity is, that is negligible. That is the meaning of metals are linear. So in your strength of material, all assumptions are like that. We say metals are isotropic. None of the material can be isotropic. We say component is homogeneous. None of the material in practical is homogeneous. These are the basic assumptions we always start. Whereas these definitions, isotropic, homogeneous for polymers, composites, elastomers, will come with the major clause. It is not always true. Only if you are making that directionally stronger or like that, maybe you can go with, but not always. Okay. So this is one point, that testing frequency, when we conduct the test to generate the SN diagram, then for metals it is not a big issue, but if you are constructing SN diagram for non-metals, then you have to be careful with the testing frequency also. Okay, the greater the number of cycles in the loading history, the smaller the stress that material can withstand. This is a straightforward definition, straightforward statement. You apply low load, obviously your component will survive for longer life. You apply larger magnitude, the component will fail bit early compared to smaller magnitude. Ideally, yield or the ultimate strength, you can fail the material in one cycle, straightforward. You apply directly the load magnitude as that of ultimate strength, that is the maximum strength of the material. Or if your failure criteria is yielding, then yield strength. Yield value, the load which causes yield, if you apply, then component fail in one cycle. If you apply the load 50% of the yield, then component may give you 10 to the power 3 cycles. Okay, now you apply 25% of the yield load, the component life is further increased than 10, maybe 10 to the power 4 cycles. So that is the meaning of that statement, straightforward statement. Okay, fine. So here an image of August Wöhler, who is known to be father of systematic high cycle life fatigue analysis, who actually modeled the initial SN diagram. Okay, and here you can observe the standard SN diagram, which is plotted along the x-axis. It is number of cycles n, and this is a log plot. So log n it is. Horizontal axis must be logarithmic. The vertical axis could be logarithmic or non-logarithmic. That doesn't matter because the values are much lesser. Ultimate strength of the material could be 600, 700, 800, not more than that. Usually our conventional engineering material. So that scale we can easily have. Okay, or you can plot with log also. Log also you can use. Therefore, SN diagrams are also known as log plots. Okay, or modern day for simplicity, people use semi-log. Either way is possible. It doesn't affect, but x direction has to be logarithmic because of the large variation of the parameter. So quite straightforward, basic understanding of your high school or 11th, 12th standard diagram, maths, geometry. Okay, fine. Now, this diagram is actually shown for UNS standard G41 2000 steel material. Okay, let us look into the diagram. What and all factors we have to see in this particular diagram, what to look for. Okay, first thing, if you see for 10 to the power 0 cycle, that means 1. If you want only one cycle, the component should fail in one cycle, then it is the ultimate strength of the material, which comes as a first point. Ultimate strength of the material, which comes as a first point. Many papers, instead of ultimate, will also use sigma f dash. Here sigma f dash means true fracture strength. True fracture strength. You know the SN diagram. Please recall your knowledge of material science and strength of material. You have two different stress components. I mean, to tell. One is engineering stress, where you plot sigma is equal to F by A naught, original cross-sectional area. Engineering stress. Other one is sigma true stress, where you plot F by AI, instantaneous area. Here I is not initial, I is instantaneous. At that moment, what is the cross section? True stress strain diagram. After yielding, true stress increases than engineering stress. Okay, so sometimes instead of ultimate strength, even the true fracture strength is plotted here as your first point. Okay, then next significant term to look here is somewhere around 10 to the power 2 to 10 to the power 3. For this particular steel, it is this value, maybe here, okay, somewhere here in between. But some steels usually will put a cutoff at 10 to the power 3. We'll put cutoff here. Okay. For this particular steel, it is somewhere between that. What you can observe, the slope of the curve has been changed. You can observe here slope is different, and after that slope is different. The slope of the curve is different. Okay. So that means you can have a clear differentiation between the material behavior when the cycles are approximately less than 10 to the power 3, and when you expect the component for greater than 10 to the power 3 cycles. Greater than 10 to the power 3 and less than 10 to the power 3. The behavior of the material is totally different. Okay. And greater than 10 to the power 3, what you have, you call this particular region as high cycle fatigue region. So whatever equations we are talking in this chapter, chapter 2, are only applicable if the component life is expected greater than 10 to the power 3, not less than. Okay. Less than that, whatever is there, less than 10 to the power 3, we say that it is a low cycle fatigue region, LCF. And we can plan to adopt strain life approach, not the stress life approach in this particular region. Why is that? I have explained in chapter 1. Please listen back to the lecture if you have forgot. Okay, one student even asked the doubts also there. What is LCF, high cycle fatigue? I have explained that. Even that time I actually opened this slide also and shown that. Okay, more details we'll discuss in the chapter 3 about LCF or strain life approach. Now whatever we are discussing is only about 10 to the power 3 number of cycles. Okay. And one more significant parameter now in the curve, which comes approximately at 10 to the power 6. So these are cutoff points, but in real practical, as you can observe, here you can see it is little bit less than 10 to the power 3 for this particular steel, because you know steel's carbon content we can vary, alloying element we can vary. There is more than 1000 category of steels. In general, we expect high cycle fatigue life to be applied in 10 to the power 3 to 10 to the power 6 for steels. When it is said steels and high cycle fatigue analysis, then straightforward the general understanding, unless and until it is stated, you must consider 10 to the power 3 to 10 to the power 6. Nowadays, high strength steels are there. People also take their 10 to the power 7 even for steel. Okay, little bit more away from the conservative design. They're taking little bit more risk. People are going with that for high strength steels. Okay, titanium nickel alloy, when it is said you have to apply high cycle fatigue, then you have to take 10 to the power 3 to 10 to the power 7. This is for titanium or nickel alloy, the commonly used in biomedical industries or aircraft industries, hard to machine materials, hard materials, nickel titanium alloys. Okay. And if it is aluminum and copper, I will write here above. If that is stated, we have to say 10 to the power 8. This is for highly ductile material like aluminum or copper. Okay. This is general understanding where to, how much to plot, how many cycles to plot. 10 to the power 3 to 10 to the power 6 for steel, 10 to the power 3 to 10 to the power 7 for nickel or titanium alloys, and 10 to the power 3 to 10 to the power 8 for aluminum copper alloys. And later we'll compare also the curves for different material. That time I'll highlight some more point about why that 10 to the power 8 etc. for ductile. Okay, let us come back to here, and you can see for steel 10 to the power 6 region, you can observe again slope is again different, and almost you can see no y here, just x. Okay, so slope is almost infinity or straight line. Theoretically straight line, practically it will not be straight line. You get very small slope, very small slope. Okay, but here theoretically it is almost a straight line, almost a straight line. So after 10 to the power 6, whatever the stress level you have, which gives you the stress level, which gives you 10 to the power 6 number of cycles. That stress level is known as endurance limit. Maybe you have used several times this term in your MD1, endurance limit, sigma endurance, En, common notation, or SE, sometimes S or sigma. Any notation is used for stress, either sigma or S. So SE or En. Here also you can write only E. It is the same. Okay. This stress value, the stress value at which you can get 10 to the power 6 number of cycle life for steel material is known as endurance limit. If you apply any stress value lower than that, lower than this endurance limit value, then your component is ideally never fails. It should not fail. So you are talking about infinite life design concept. Infinite life design concept you are talking about if you are applying a stress value less than the endurance limit. That is what is written here, infinite life. Infinite life. And about 10 to the power 3, we have high cycle fatigue regime, HCF commonly written. Less than 10 to the power 3, we have low cycle fatigue regime. And starting from cycle 1 to 10 to the power 6 cycles, we will, or 10 to the power 7 in case of nickel aluminum, and 10 to the power 8, nickel and titanium, it is 10 to the power 7, aluminum and copper, it is 10 to the power 8. So this cutoff, starting from the beginning, up to 10 to the power 8, considering all the materials in general, we can say finite life for aluminum and copper, aluminum or copper. For 10 to the power 6, we can say finite life for steel material, finite life for steel material, finite life region. So now you know that in a SN diagram, there are several regions to look for. Infinite life region, finite life region, high cycle fatigue regime, low cycle fatigue regime, various slopes in the diagram, okay. And I will erase this, it is too many writing here. I have more points to discuss. Okay, yeah, let me erase. Okay, now with this clean diagram, you can see all the parameters what I have marked are all there, already there with the image, finite life, infinite life region. Okay, yeah, fine. Now what else? Okay, this will remove. Okay, fine. Next, you can see there are several dots. There are several dots. Some dots are above, some dots are below. You can observe, right? Several dots are there, some over the line. Okay. So what are these dots? Anybody? Anyone want to comment? What are these dots?
Those are the experimental values.
Correct, correct. Experimental values. So whatever this arrow mark here indicates, what does it mean? Any idea? When we show arrow mark like this, that means these components, this experimental specimen is stopped at that particular cycle. It didn't fail. It is having further life. That is what is indicated by the arrow mark. The test was stopped there on the specimen. Okay. So now first take one specimen, apply as a first cycle, apply ultimate strength up to their load, and once it is reached the ultimate strength of the material, you can see that significant necking down, faster reduction in cross sectional area, and thus engineering stress value then after that going to reduce. That point, ultimate strength point, you apply the load, take one specimen and apply the load, you are finding that at one cycle component is failing. As per ASTM standard, we have to do at least minimum 3 tests to 5 tests. Usually 5, but people also nowadays less than 5 they will do 3 tests. Now this is only if you conduct very careful test under the stated condition. To normalize or to average out the errors, better to go for 5 sample at one stress level. Please remember, at one stress level, this is for static, not for fatigue, static. Now when coming to fatigue, when talking about the fatigue, at one stress level, at least 10 samples need to be tested at one stress level. So to obtain this initial point, that is a static, we can go for 3 or 5 tests, and after that maybe you take a stress value 10% of ultimate, or I may say 0.1 type of SU, I mean 0.1 less, 0.9 times of SU, you apply that stress and consider at least 10 specimens, not one specimen. On 10 specimen, do the testing, 10 specimen. So the multiple dots what you find in that region are that. Okay. It is not that only one test you do. We have to do many large tests. What happens? Every material is not identical. Every sample is not identical. No matter how carefully you fabricate, one sample may fail just before reaching 10 to the power 1. That means 10 cycles. One more component may fail just after. Some component will fail at 1000 here and there. Some component will fail at bit lesser stress value. Some component will fail at bit higher stress value. So in this zone, you have multiple sample data. So similarly, take one more value, maybe 0.8 times of SU. Okay, experimentally, or 0.95 times of the ultimate. So like this, you come down, reducing the stress value, and at each stress value, test at least 10 sample. Okay, test at least 10 sample. Then you can understand, coming from 100% to finally maybe somewhere around 0.4 of SU. 10 sample each. How many samples you need to count? At least 60. If there are uncertainty, 100. You require at least 60 to 100 samples to be tested to draw the basic SN diagram. Okay, so you have all that data scattered here and there, scattered here and there, and then you can plot a mean line, averaging out all that values, averaging out all that values. This diagram, what I'm drawing here as a red line between here to here, is the high cycle fatigue SN diagram, SN curve. Less than that is a strain life approach, or finite life, LCF, low cycle fatigue region. So we are not bothered about less than 10 to the power 3 cutoff mark. For this steel, it could be somewhere around here. But for average, in general, for steel, we put 10 to the power 3 as a cutoff. Okay. Then, especially for steel material, what you find is, go back to your material science again. In the material science, you see steels are interstitial solid solutions, not substitutional, interstitial solid solutions, where carbon atom being smaller in size go and occupy the interstitial position in a Fe crystal structure. Ion crystals are there, carbon will go and occupy the interstitial site. Under repeated loading, when you apply maybe somewhere around 0.5 times of ultimate stress value, at that stress value, component will sustain or take at least 10 to the power 6 number of cycles, at least. It can survive more also, as you can observe. At the same stress level, some component have given more nearly 10 to the power 8 cycle of life also. 10 to more than 10 to the power some component. Now this is the reason you have to test more than 10 samples, sometimes 20-25 samples also, if your data is not correct. If the test there is some mistake, if the data is not accurate, some error is there, to average out the various errors, better to go for more and more samples. Earlier it was 20, now it has come down to 10 because of the advancement in the testing instruments, fixtures, aids, carefulness with which testing is done nowadays. The accuracy of the testing equipments have been drastically improved compared to these days. Okay, when it is 1820s, then at each load people were testing 50 to 100 samples. You imagine the effort required to draw this particular diagram. Now it has come down to 10 as per modern standard. ASTM 1823 for fatigue testing. It has come down to this much low level. Okay, fine. So only for steel, especially in the case of steel, sometimes nickel and titanium alloy also, depending on the alloying content. Okay, but in case of steel, simple basic steel, let us say medium carbon steel, those interstitial atoms try to accumulate in the grain boundary regions and all, or we say dislocation pinning will occur, or the common term which you were heard earlier in static, strain hardening. Strain hardening will occur. And because of this, what happens is you find enhanced strength in the material, and after so many cycles also, metal will not fail. The steel material will not fail, and it will sustain the same load throughout. So even in case of a static, after yielding upper and lower yield point, you can see strength is increasing, which is because of the strain hardening occurring here during the yielding lower yield point. Actually, stress has to decrease after ultimate, but when coming to the lower yield point, recrystallization, that strain hardening is going to occur, reforming of the grain structure, rearrangement of the broken atoms will occur. Okay, various concepts are there in material science: dislocation, pinning, grain strengthening, grain boundary strengthening. There are various methods are there. Those phenomena, physical phenomena, even diffusion to sometimes will occur across the grain boundary, and strengthening in the material you will observe. If you operate now at this particular load, the component will not fail even in the static. You can even apply little bit higher load in static. Okay, In fatigue, you can observe because of the strength enhancement. Now, rather than going this component, this line downwards, any stress value you apply less than the endurance value. This is nothing but sigma E or SE. Okay, for steel approximately 0.5 times of ultimate strength. If we consider the empirical relation, it is a predictable statistical model. 0.5 times of ultimate, we will assume that it is assumption in the absence of experimental data. Rather than the line going straight forward downwards, you see the knee formation. We will say that knee formation curve is like this. It is coming and it is going like this. So knee formation is because of the strain hardening what is occurring in the material, and any stress value you operate lesser than this endurance limit, component will never fail. At least theoretically, ideally, it should not fail, and we say infinite life region, infinite life. So if your design approach, as we discussed in chapter 1, is infinite life approach, that means you are restricting the load over the component less than endurance limit. The maximum load you can apply over the component, your failure criteria is endurance. The moment you apply the load higher than endurance, component will fail less than 10 to the power 6 cycle. Okay, so if you are telling that I am going with the infinite life design concept, then you are restricted with the value of loading to apply over the material. Component will not fail for long number of cycles. But by that time, is that worthiness of the component is there or not, that you have to decide as a designer. Therefore, people are nowadays talking about components which can give you less than 10 to the power 6 cycle and can sustain greater than 10 to the power 3 cycles. So people obviously want to improve the life from low cycle to high cycle. But we are even not much bothered about improving much higher for most of engineering application. There are applications where you want very strong. Nowadays, there is a concept called very high cycle fatigue, very high cycle fatigue. The recent one paper I read in the 2019 or 20 time published paper, they are talking about a term called very high cycle fatigue. So greater than 10 to the power 6, they want to put into this type of analysis category. Okay. So this is all about the basics on SN diagram. Anybody is having any query question on this? We are going to discuss further also on this. Any doubts you get in between, you can stop me and raise your query. Okay, fine. Now, endurance limit, what is mean by that? You got the idea. Endurance limit. The stress value at which when you operate or load the component, the component should give you at least 10 to the power 6 cycle of life, or theoretically should give you infinite life. Okay. Practically at least 10 to the power 6 if it is a steel material, 10 to the power 7 if it is a titanium or nickel material, and 10 to the power 8 if it is a aluminum or copper alloy. At least the stress value which can give you the life of at least that number of cycles, then that is known to be endurance limit. Okay, then fatigue strength. When we say the term called fatigue strength, I can even say endurance limit fatigue strength when I write number of cycles along with that. If I write S 10 to the power 6 or SF 10 to the power 6, whatever, okay, or sigma 10 to the power 6, this itself is endurance limit. But it is only with the writing of the notation. If I specify how many number of cycles it is going to give me, then I would like to call that term as a fatigue strength. For example, S 10 to the power 3. That means the stress value you can apply to obtain 10 to the power 3 number of cycle of life. Fatigue strength of the material to achieve 10 to the power 3 number of cycle. S 10 to the power 4. Fatigue strength of the material to achieve 10 to the power 4 number of cycles, like this. When we say endurance limit, it is a fixed term. It is a fixed term. The definition of endurance limit is the stress value which can give you theoretically infinite number of life cycles, or material specifically you want to talk, for steel 10 to the power 6 number of cycle life, at least it has to give mandatorily. That stress value is endurance limit. Any stress value less than endurance limit you are talking about, say what is the stress here which can give you the life of 10 to the power 4, that is the fatigue strength of the material to obtain that much life cycle. You want 10 to the power 3 point, then that much you have to write in this particular fashion. Yes, 10 to the power 3, yes, 10 to the power 4, yes, 10 to the power 5. The stress value to obtain fatigue life of 10 to the power 5 is the fatigue strength of the material which gives you that. Okay, so therefore this N term, it is not a new term actually, it is the usually we write like this SNF. Here the notation is given in this fashion. SNF means stress. How to read this? You see the reading of the notation: stress cycles to failure. NF means cycles to failure. So stress value to cause or to give you this much number of cycles before failure or up to failure. That is how you have to read. What I have written here, S 10 to the power 3, I will write here again, SNF it is, where NF means cycles to failure. S means stress. So stress value to give a particular number of cycles to failure is the fatigue strength. For example, 10 to the power 3, 10 to the power 4, etc. If this term is not told, 10 to the power 3, 10 to the power 4, 10 to the power 5 is not written and simply mentioned as fatigue strength, then you have to assume by default, if it is said only strength to the fatigue strength, then you have to consider S 10 to the power 3 as standard. So in problems, in numerical, we will not give all this. This you should have the idea. Straightforward, we'll write endurance limit of the component is this much. Fatigue strength is some value, some X value. You have to straightforward assume by default that fatigue strength, when it is stated without this 10 to the power 3, 10 to the power 4 or 10 to the power 5, etc. subscript, by default straightforward assume that the strength which can give you up to the life of 10 to the power 3 cycles. This is a default, by default. Okay. Yes. Anybody is having any question? I am hearing some sound here, or by mistake mic is unmuted. Yes. Is there any query? I think it is by default, by mistake. Okay. If any query is there, please put it in the chat box. So now you can observe one more diagram. Same SN diagram here. Okay. So usually when we say stress value of 0.9 SU, stress value of 0.8 SU, okay, somewhere here yield, if you want to calculate for a ductile material, it is somewhere around 0.75 of the ultimate, 0.75 to 0.7. Usually this is our interpretation. Okay, the empirical interpretation is in this fashion. Here it is ultimate. Then our interpretation is this much. Sigma U or SU, any notation. Alternately, I'll use sometimes sigma U or SU. Okay. So 7.5 is around yield. So if we apply around yield load in the component, ductile component, somewhere around it will give you 10 to the power 4, usually 10 to the power 3 for steel. For steel it is. And it is left to the designer whether to consider. He wants to consider his failure where. Depending on that, he can modify this particular plot. So usually 10 to the power 3 stress value, we consider yield for a ductile material, whatever the yield strength is there in the absence of given data, only in the absence of data, not always. If the data is not available, we can even assume yield strength of the material as 10 to the power 3, or later we'll see one empirical equation. We have a mathematical equation. We can calculate and find out what should be S 10 to the power 3. See, you see the various methodologies what people are adopting. Depending on the given data, you have to decide. We're not going to tell you in the question which one to select what. Okay, we'll provide all data. You have to choose the right criteria. Always remember, first priority is experimental data. So when I give you in the question experimental data, theoretical data, and some assumed data, the first preference should be given to experimental data in the problem. We'll not tell you, we'll give all, but you should be aware as an engineer which data to select. Then next is empirical relation, mathematical relation data. Empirical relation data. This is the second preference for you when the data, multiple data are there. And at last is predicted from static. Predicted from the static load. So if you want to consider or directly the static value, let us say static loads values, from there we will consider. This is the last preference. Last preference. In the absence of data to plot the curve, you want at least 3 points, because you have seen the ascent diagram, how it is starting from here. You have one particular slope, then another slope, and then finally like this. So to make this line, you want at least 3 points. Point 1 here, point 2 here, and point 3 here. And this point 2 should be at 10 to the power 3. Point 3 should be at 10 to the power 6. And this is at 10 to the power 0. You want 1, 2, 3 points to construct the diagram. So how to obtain these 1, 2, 3 points in the absence of experimental data? We can plan like this. Ultimate strength we will take as 0.1. Yield strength we will take as 0.2. And calculated or somehow obtain the endurance limit, because in the absence of data, sometimes people might give you endurance limit only. Other data they are not giving to plot the ascent diagram. Then endurance limit is available, sigma E, that can be plotted. That is the third point. Then just connect the curve to draw the diagram. This is one way how we can interpret or obtain the diagram. And where there is elastic region, plastic region, obviously between ultimate to yield, there is a plastic region. Now this could be possible only for a highly ductile material. Brittle material, yield and ultimate, there is not much difference. Definitely do not go for this. The third point, the diagram what is shown, you have to ignore in case of brittle materials, or even in case of steel. This is not fully recommended. Whereas these two options, experimental or empirical relation, is highly recommended. But people use in the absence of data to some extent to obtain the solution, approximate solution, not exact solution. Okay. So same diagram showing various regions. This I already explained, so I'll go to the next. Okay. Now we will talk about comparison. Earlier I said why we will consider aluminium alloy, or if it is a copper alloy, copper or aluminium alloy, I said that we are going to consider 10 to the power 8. Okay. If it is nickel, titanium, we will consider nickel alloy, Inconel, etc. Or titanium alloy, we will consider 10 to the power 7. For steels, we will consider mild steel to be specifically plain carbon steel. Steel also nowadays, as I said, 10 to the power 7 will consider if it is high strength steels. Okay, that is possible. Alloy steels are there, various more than 1000, 2000 category of steels are there. Its performance is totally different. The low carbon steel, medium carbon steel, high carbon steel, performance is totally different just by varying minor percentage of carbon. Forget about adding other elements. Its effect further added up. Okay, so for steel, in an average, in general, we'll put 10 to the power 6 as a cutoff, because at 6, in case of steel material, as I explained earlier, we can clearly see a knee formation. We will say this is knee formation. Okay, knee formation. So knee formation we can see in case of a steel material, and it happens why? Because it is a interstitial solid solution, as we have discussed in first chapter. If you want to explain the macroscopic behavior, we have to look one scale down, one size scale down. And when we look into the microstructure, microscopic and nano level crystal structure, interstitial solid solution we have for the mild steels, where you will observe the physical mechanism of material science: dislocation, pinning, diffusion, grain boundary strengthening, say grain boundary segregation, several physical phenomena which is happening, maybe because of slipping, because of pinning. Okay, all that will happen, and that is the reason you find predominant strain hardening effect, and you can observe the knee formation. So questions will come. Describe why knee formation is observed or typical characteristic for steel material when compared to other alloys. You have to explain with all these crucial points. Okay, not simply at that point strain hardening occurs. You have to write why it occurs, how it is occurs, what is the reason. The main reason is this: the solid solution, interstitial solid solution, which causes where carbon atom fits or sits at the interstitial position, and under the application of the cyclic load at large number of cycles, strain hardening occurs because of the physical material science principle like dislocation, pinning, diffusion, grain boundary segregation, which are all causes of plastic deformation. Earlier in our chapter 1, we learned various philosophies of plastic deformation, various methods. It could be slipping, it could be twinning, it could be diffusion, it could be creep. If it is a high temperature application, then only it could be creep, or it could be combination of these multiple. That is possible. So that provides some strengthening for the steel at this particular, and you can clearly observe a knee formation. But when you look now aluminum alloy or copper alloy, which is a substitutional solid solution, go back to chapter 2 of material science. Here it is a substitutional solid solution. And in this case, you do not find strain hardening effect, pronounced strain hardening effect as that you find in steel. There will be to some extent, but you will not see. Even if you compare the stress strain diagram of steel and aluminium, steel you are drawing like this. And if it is asked aluminium and steel plot to draw, aluminium you used to draw simply like this. Only thing is the plastic deformation strain rate is greater for aluminum and copper compared to the steel material. Then it will come down drastically at a faster rate with a large plastic deformation. Okay, so this effect is there in steel. That is why similar effect you will find even in the fatigue, and that is why knee formation. And it happens only at a stress level which can give you the 10 to the power 6 number of cycles or greater. Therefore, we say that is a endurance limit, clear cut point. In aluminum alloys, copper alloys, you do not have a clear cut point. The curve go on decreasing, you can see. But what you observe is slope of the curve is go on reducing throughout, and approximately somewhere around 10 to the power 8 region, 10 to the power 8 cutoff region, you find that slope is significantly smaller than the slope you find somewhere around 10 to the power 5, 10 to the power 6 level. So you can clearly compare the slope. The slope at 10 to the power 8 is significantly low. That means it is an indication of curve is getting flattening out. Real flattening out you will not observe as you find for steel, but prediction is that curve will flatten out. Okay, so that is why we take 10 to the power 8 as a cutoff point. Okay, this is the reason. That is why we assume 10 to the power 8 for aluminum and copper. We will not consider 10 to the power 6 because at 10 to the power 6 the slope is still large. Okay, and what you design, the component may not sustain this much load. It may fail further, it may fail less. You cannot say any stress value you operate less than that endurance value. If you consider at 10 to the power 6, it is going to survive infinitely. it is very difficult to say. But after 10 to the power 8, the possibility is very, very less because curve has got almost flattened up, not fully flattened up. It is going down, but still the rate is low. OK. So note the presence of fatigue limit. Fatigue limit means endurance limit. Very important when the comparison between the two curves is asked. Note the presence of endurance limit, mainly in many steels and its absence in aluminum alloys. More detail clearly available in the Dieter textbook. Go and look into this reference book. OK. So this we have already, I have explained. This is theory related to that. Various particles, etc. I said with carbon, even nitrogen could be there. Because whatever defect you find in steels, mostly interstitial defect. Substitutional defects are rare in steel material. In aluminum, copper alloys, it is a substitutional defect. OK. So their dislocation pinning will not find grain boundary segregation. These are all material science related terms. Look for material science textbook, maybe William D. Callister, very nicely explained. Standard book for material science, Callister, W.D. Callister, sometimes commonly known to be very nice book for material science. OK, standard book, one of the well-known standard book. All those information is there. You look into that. It is out of the scope of our present syllabus. I will not waste time onto that now. OK. So what happens at large number of cycles, if you want to achieve higher number of cycles or you want to operate in the high cycle fatigue regime, as we have discussed in the chapter 1, total life model, we talked about 90% of the cycles go for crack nucleation or crack initiation. So total life is life required for crack initiation and crack propagation. This is what we have seen in our previous chapter. So 90% of the cycles go for crack initiation in high cycle fatigue, only in high cycle fatigue. When you talk about low cycle fatigue, then crack initiation cycles are very, very less, OK, whereas only crack propagation is dominating more in low cycle fatigue. Therefore, the SN diagrams and this high cycle fatigue life approach is not suitable at all. OK, this governs mainly with the elastic stresses. High cycle fatigue governs with the elastic stress region, not with the plasticity. There is no term plastic strain in the equation of high cycle fatigue. The later we'll see some mathematical equations in the coming classes. There is no term for plasticity inclusion. Therefore, we cannot talk. Earlier, I'll go back few slides. Here in this slide, you can observe in the low cycle fatigue regime, there is plastic behavior is there. In high cycle fatigue regime, we start from yield to the next lower values. Elastic regime we are talking about. So plasticity term itself is not available in the equation. Then you cannot apply that particular equations in the low cycle fatigue regime, high cycle fatigue approach. OK, whereas low cycle fatigue approach, strain life you can apply even in the elastic region because it has got both component, elastic as well as plastic. Both stress equations are there in that equation. OK, so now that is the meaning of this particular statement. If you want to increase the high cycle fatigue life, more of the cycles go for crack initiation, then what could be beneficial? Increasing the crack initiation time. How you can improve the crack initiation in the material? Go for strengthening the surface. Few points I have addressed about this, about having CRS, compressive residual stresses in the component in the previous chapter. Fatigue life affecting factors I have discussed. I have said about several phenomena, short peening, plating. Plating is detrimental, not improving. OK, there are other concepts called deep rolling, mechanical surface treatments, deep rolling, short peening. These can be done over the surface. So hardened surface you will get, compressive residual stress you get, hard surface. And we have discussed in our previous chapter, various crack propagations possible along the grain, across the grain. Which structure, microstructure is better, fine grain or coarse grain, and when? Statement has to be very clear. General definition we cannot say. In fatigue, we cannot say coarse structure is better. We cannot say fine structure is better. For which it is better, for which it is not. Fine crystal structure, that means hard material, are better to resist the crack initiation. Crack initiation will not occur easily. So the high cycle fatigue, if you are planning for, then harder the material, it is good. When before the crack is initiated. Once crack is initiated, then crack will propagate much faster in fine grain material or hard material. Then our intention is to have coarse grain or ductile structure. That is why surface strengthening we say. Surface, you have a cylindrical shaft. You have a cylindrical shaft. A fine rim region of the cylindrical shaft. A small rim region, maybe up to 1 mm depth or something in this. This is not hollow, I am sketching. Consider as a solid only. Consider as a solid. That's inner, you make it as a coarse grain. Outer, make it as a fine grain. That means outer surface is hard. Hard outer surface. Crack will not begin itself. Initiation will not take place. And once crack initiation takes place, then propagation you have to restrict. Crack propagation. Whether it is along the grain, across the grain, along the grain boundaries. Various types are possible. That we have to restrict. Therefore, core has to be coarse, surface has to be harder. What can be done? Look for various surface strengthening mechanism. Mechanical surface treatment, laser treatments, surface attrition, SMAT is there nowadays, surface material attrition, surface alloying. There are so many techniques. Adopt depending on the requirement. Not all techniques are suitable for all application. Okay, so this is about that. For generating SN diagram, now you are aware multiple stress amplitude should be selected and at least 10 samples need to be tested at selected stress level. So that is what is means several stress amplitude, multiple samples. Okay, then plot number of failed specimen versus log life and draw a median line, mean line. That is mean by 50% reliability, 50% reliability line if you draw the median. That means at a defined stress level, 50% of the component survive, 50% of the component may fail. Average you are drawing the curve. As you have seen, there were several points along which you have drawn this line. Okay, we'll look into that about reliability little bit later in the coming slides. Okay, so this is about the R.R. Murray test setup. I have said the rotating beam bending test, pure bending test. This is schematic representation of the test setup. Important to note is highly polished, mirror polished specimen is used. Say this is the specimen here. This is the specimen what I am hatching. Okay, test specimen as per ASTM standard, a test specimen. You have to apply the bending load. So you can observe here bending load is applied with the hanger, weight hanger. Bending load has been applied. Then here dead center for revolution counting. Here there is a motor which is now rotated. This shaft is rotated. This full shaft is rotated alternatively. Compression and tension will generate in each fiber. Okay. So these are the standards here. What should be the dimension size? That is what is mentioned. 0.3 inch is the total reduced cross section area at the center. You know what is how the standard Tengel testing specimen looks like. Similar specimen here also of corresponding standard. Okay. So all that is shown here. You now rotate. So this type of test rig is developed by the R.R. Murray. So very famously known R.R. Murray's rotating beam bending test. RR Moore's rotating beam bending test, and most of the SN curves available, are for the bending test. Unless and until stated by default, if you find any SN curve, you have to assume that it is for the rotating bending test. It is obtained. The SN diagram is plotted by the test conducted through rotating bending. And as I said, very important, the stress behavior variation to note. Okay, stress behavior maximum at the extreme fiber, and crack initiation occurs where? At the surface. In case of bending, neutral axis very low. So this is a bending stress pattern. Now, if you want to apply the same to the tension loading, tension, then this is not true. If you pull the same shaft, you have the same specimen, instead of going for bending, you are going to apply tensile load. Let us say you are applying tensile load over this F tensile test. Fatigue tensile load. You are applying tension compression or fully pull and leave repeated load or alternating load, whatever the tension type of load you are applying. Now how the stress distribution here? Stress distribution is uniform for tension. This is the stress distribution for a tensile load. Entire cross section is under stress now. Entire cross section uniformly under stress. Here stress calculation is sigma by A. Sigma is force upon A. Axial bending, sigma is M by B into Y. M by I into Y. So about the neutral axis, you can see because of this Y, the stress go on vary. Extreme Y you find at the extreme fiber. So stress is not uniform in the bending case, where stress is uniform in the axial case. That means all the fibers are stressed equally in tension. In bending, extreme fibers are experiencing higher stress value. Therefore, SN diagram what you find for bending is more conservative. Same SN diagram you cannot apply for tensile loading. In tensile loading, component will fail early because entire cross section is under the same stress level what you find here, sigma T and sigma C. All layers here are under the same T, sigma T. But in bending, all layers are not there. Some layers experience lesser strength. That will give you more longer life. Where in tension, that will not be. Okay, so nowadays people are going for tension test to generate the fatigue diagram. There are also SN diagrams available with the torsion loading also. With the SN diagram you have from the bending RR Moore's bending test, you cannot use the same data unless and until you modify to suit for the tension loading or torsion loading. Okay, for each type of loading, fatigue curve has to be generated. This is important to note. This is one more complexity now in the fatigue. Standard, if you see static test, you have standard tension diagram, standard tension diagram, stress strain diagram, standard. Compression or tension, you observe the similar behavior. But in fatigue, bending will give you different behavior. Tension load will give you different behavior. And torsion will give you, if you apply torsion load, it will give you different behavior for the component. This is more complexity. Okay, in static loading, bending or tension, you will get the same Young's modulus, same material properties, similar behavior. So bending here is giving more conservative SN diagram. You have to modify that accordingly with some factor of safety values or certain parameter empirical values to suit it down for the axial load and corresponding torsion. This you have to remember, very, very important. But what is standard? In general, most of the SN curves are based on the RR Moore's bending diagram. Few years back, some 15 years back, getting SN diagram was very difficult. Data was not available in the open domain. Today, for most of the metals, now data is available in the open domain and mostly bending related. Again, companies, industries who have the data, all data related to fatigue is not revealed even till date. So many data is there, and that data is having some copyright and their own under their own storages, not yet available in open domain. This is one more problem for design engineers in general, freelancers. Open data is very scarce. Okay, so this is just a mechanism about the bending. You know about the bending, how the shear force diagram, how the bending moment diagram varies. Already I have said the stress pattern and all. You can analyze this particular slide diagrams. Okay. Finally, with the test, as I have explained earlier, you have multiple stress values. At each stress values, n number of components. Some component will fail little bit early, some component will fail little bit later at a defined stress level. Some will give you little bit higher life, some will give you little bit lesser life. Okay, so you have highly scattered data. You have highly scattered data. So what is this bottommost line? What is this bottommost line? This line is cut off between 90% survival or 5% failure. Whatever bottom is there, only one sample is there below. So this SN diagram, what is shown here, it is started from 10 to the power 3 only for high cycle region, let us say. So this bottommost line is 90% survival reliability or 5% failure. Only 5% of the total tested component failed before you construct this particular line. You have one more line at the upper end. It is reverse of that. It is reverse of that. Okay. One more SN diagram. This line is then 90% failure. So 90% of the failure occurred before this particular line, or only 5% survived. Now it is left to the designer. You want to choose as a designer which SN diagram line. You want to be conservative, you go for the bottommost line. You want to be the little bit risk taker and go for fail-safe design, go for this upper line. Okay, little bit more risk is there, but you do your design with the philosophy fail safe. Even if it fails, some corrective measures are there to ensure the failure is in a safe way. Okay, so you are not sure your component what you are designed is going to give you that defined life 10 to the power 4, 10 to the power 5 or some defined life. You are not sure it is giving or not because 90% of the time it failed. Or 95%, sorry, 90 or 95, 95, 90 and 5, 95 it is. Okay, so 95% of the components failed before reaching this point. Only 5% survived. That means in a design, in a component manufactured by you, your design, 95% failure is going to occur. 5% only survival limit. Then you want to take the bottommost line where 95% survival is guaranteed. 5% chances always you can take as a designer. Then you are going for more conservative approach, more cost to the company. Okay, material, diameter, dimension, you have to make bit more thicker, larger structure compared to the top line. Now it is left to designer. You want to choose which comfortable line. Many people choose in between, average. That is what is I mean by 50% median line between average. Now this line is 50% failure, 50% survival, median line. So most of the SN diagram what you find in the open domain are median life. So whenever it is stated median life, it is nothing but this. 50% of the components survived, and 50% of the component failed. Okay, most of the SN diagrams are with median life. I think now you have correct understanding of SN diagram. You have used even in your MD, but how far you have interpreted, which line, which diagram you have used. These ideas are important when you talk about fatigue. Okay, I think we'll stop here. We are done with the time. So same thing has been mentioned here, is shown here. The top line, bottom line, and the median line. Which one to consider is left to you as a designer when you have multiple data, depending on the design concept, the failure theory which you want to apply, whether you want safe life or fail safe. So upper one, you can plan for fail safe. If you go to lower one, you can go for safe life. It is safe. Definitely 95% of the chances your component is safe. Therefore, we are taking this. Bottommost, we are going with the safe life design approach. We are going as we go higher with reduced reliability, then you can see fail-safe approach is much better. This decision designer has to take depending on how we want to design, what is the risk involved in the component he is designing, which domain, what type of load pattern he is going to experience. Are there unexpected loads are coming? Are there overloads are coming? Are there any issues with the mishandling? Mishandling also causes damage to the component. Though you say as an engineer, do not handle in this way, still people used to use that. That is common. Okay, so you have to plan. So this is all about SN diagram. Here you can see various materials. SN diagram I already explained. You just know, just look into that is it. You can see pronounced knee formation for steels. So heat treated alloy steel strength is little bit more higher. Heat treated grain refinement is there. Therefore, you find enhanced behavior. Medium carbon steels, little bit lower behavior, aluminium or cast iron. Cast iron is a brittle material. Correct, no? So strength is obviously much lesser. These are all the terms. In the next class, we'll see about constructing SN diagram in the absence of experimental data. So all these SN diagrams here, these are experimental for the material. But many a time we will not get experimental data. Then how to construct? One example I have shown you today with static property, but it should be given least preference. First preference is experimental, second is empirical. Empirical we'll see in the next class. Okay, fine. So this is all about next class also we can see. Anybody is having any query? Any queries on SN diagram, its related discussion? Okay, fine. If there are no queries, we'll end our today's meeting. Thank you all for joining for today's session. Have a nice day.